This is the session 101 on getting your customers to contribute. So who has an open source project that they either are governing or work for a company with? Good, because I'm not going to ask you the question who's using open source. That's kind of irrelevant, I think, in this conference. But who are we? I'm Nick. I've been in the open source world ever since university. I've never worked in a company that is solely proprietary. And 3 years ago, I started at GitLab with the mission of get us more contributors. In short, right? So GitLab is an open core product. It has a MIT license-based and then the GitLab license-based. But before I go into that, I just came straight from my holiday, so I just wanted to show you some holiday pictures. I was cuddling llamas. That's also very nice. So that was me last week. Anyway, back to the topic. Raymond, who are you?
Yeah, hi. I'm a staff engineer in Nick's team.
A bit closer to the mic, I think.
Also at GitLab. And yeah, like Nick, I've also been fortunate enough to just go on holiday. Yeah, there's me a couple of hours after quad biking. But I live in London, which in this picture is nice and sunny, but not always, apparently. And yeah, I've been also as part of Nick's team for the last 3 years building tools and processes around making our contribution process that much easier for contributors.
So before I kind of get into the details of how to get your customer to contribute, we have to kind of understand like how humans behave in a way, because humans are really complex beings. So I don't know if you know this story, but all of you, for now, are farmers. You're not my farmers, you're all farmers, and you have a bunch of sheep. Just imagine, close your eyes, you're a farmer with sheep. So once upon a time, you as a farmer and a bunch of sheep had this thing called the town commons. And if we go further, all the sheep were going into the little village that we're all inhabiting, and all our sheep were grazing, and everyone was happy. Sounds like a dream, right? But then more sheep got added because everything went well, and at some point, there was no more grass. And then you could question, but who was responsible for this grass? Like, why did no one take care of the grass, or why did no one say stop? So, like, what does the governance of this town look like? And why did no one say, hey, let's not add more sheep before everything got depleted? This is a bit like government in a way, but it's also like governance. So in open source projects, you have a bunch of these kind of regulations to keep things healthy. In countries, you have something similar. So if you did question, and this is like a thinking exercise that goes way back, it's Aristotle that said, so what's common to many is taken least care of. For all men have greater regard for what is their own than for what they possess in common with others. So it's a very complicated sentence to say getting contributors is almost impossible. So, because basically you're trying to get people to do something good for everyone instead of for yourself. That doesn't mean it's impossible. We just have to kind of understand how we work as a society, how we work as humans. So let's continue. So imagine that we then as farmers, you as farmers say, I'm not being part of this commons anymore. I have my own little land. Then I can take care of my own little grass, and no one will kind of deplete it. Just imagine that if you would do that, you need 3.5 times as much land than if you would kind of all share and try to take care of that land together. Does that make sense? So if you go back, that's actually a study that they did for open source. If you as a company would create all the software yourself, you would have to pay 3.5 times as much than if you would consume open source. Fascinating, but that still doesn't give us the answer of how do we get contributors. So okay, let's move on. And for that, I actually wanted to go into a bit of like how do humans work, and I want to kind of understand if you know what this is. It's a recyclement kind of park, if you will. So every couple months you drive there and you dump all your trash there. For me, this was my treasure hunt as a kid. So I went there with my bicycle and I took all the computers out of these boxes. And you can see that, like I made fans in the summer, and I recycled all of that stuff in a way, and I learned a lot on how computers work. So this is me a long time ago, hacking away. This is also you. It's also you working with these open source libraries. It's you hacking away with all these things that you can just get and learn without asking for permission. So let's see what else we can have here. We're hacking away. I was no longer a student and then suddenly I had to find a job. Maybe some of you recognize yourself into this. In 2008, I wrote a blog post that I didn't remember. I looked it up with the Internet Archive. And somehow I wrote, this is really cool because I can actually participate as a person and not as a function. If we look into the human brain, I was basically intrinsically motivated because I was part of something larger. This was the Drupal ecosystem at the time. I've spent 15 years of my life in the Drupal ecosystem, from an individual contributor to being a board member in that open source governance. Now, why is this all relevant? And let's see, I think there's a difference between makers and takers. Have you heard of that concept? Would you classify yourself as a maker or a taker? Like a maker, so everyone here contributed at least something back? That's good. That's unfortunately not the majority. So we need to kind of figure out, and that's what we'll get to, these customers that use your software, how do you move these people from takers into makers, and what is that incentive model? So Raymond, take us to the next bit.
So, well, you probably want to ask, what does this have to do with GitLab? And good question. So instead of us telling you a little bit about it, here's one of our contributors, and he's going to just say a few words around this, hopefully.
And a customer as well.
And a customer, yeah. There's a big play button. I just got to find my way there. Yeah. Yes, exactly. For my work, I use several instances with various configurations, such as GitHub.com, the GitLab of several partners, the GitLab of the digital project, and other GitLabs we obtain after that context. As part of the GitLab and direct partnership, I was able to improve the UI for the principal view by enhancing the options of the configuration process. It is now very easy to choose between local or global Git configuration and SSH or HTTPS connection, and copy the correct command in one click. This is a concrete example of the benefits of Veenhof. I not only improved my workflow, but made it better for my team and for all Thales collaborators using GitLab. Furthermore, it is also an improvement for the over 30 million users using GitLab across the world. If you think of something in GitLab that you would like to improve, don't hesitate to contact the Thales OSS team and get in touch with our GitLab contacts. This way, it will be you that will improve your workflow of your Thales colleagues and of a lot of people across the world. So that's just one of our contributors saying something. We've also been working with other organizations along the way. Well, this is Thales, where Quintin is from, as well as Siemens, who is another one of our prolific contributors. So open source is deeply ingrained in what we do and how we do things at GitLab. But the best part of this, and we haven't told you this part yet, but that is that contributing to open source can make you twice as productive as competing firms. And that is, again, a cited study. You could possibly even imagine if you were to somehow merge those two statistics, we're looking at even bigger gains. But we all know this. Everyone here is deeply committed to open source in some way or another. But to be able to take these numbers back to your organization and actually sell this back to your organization or even your customers, this is why they should be getting involved with contributing.
So maybe a bit more here, like, can you give me an example project of what your company, or who has a company with an open source project here? What's the name of the project? Sorry? Mender? So imagine that you talk to a customer, you have two customers, and one customer is actually contributing back to your project. Basically, they will outcompete their competitor that is also using Mender, because they're actually learning more about your project and they're more efficient with your open source project. That's what this says.
They understand the ins and outs. They know it from the inside out, so they can find the shortcuts. Yeah. They can improve their own workflow on the system because their knowledge on the.
So it's one of the arguments that we use if we talk to customers at GitLab. It's like, hey, if you start to contribute back, it's like tinkering with an engine of your car. If you can tweak the engine of your car, you probably will drive better, or kind of drive your car with more insights in what's actually happening. And that's not just GitLab that says it, but that's that study that kind of found that out. And if one thing a customer cares about is being more competitive in the market as well. So that's one part of this. And then you're saying, yeah, but I still haven't figured out from this conversation how to actually convince my customers to contribute. Do you have an idea for those that actually have an open source project, what the percentage is of customers contributing versus people that maybe just are end users but not making money with your project? Like in the case of Mender? So you know the number of users, but you don't know how many actually are customers. Oh, you don't know the number of users. Also interesting. Any other project here that does know? $100 million downloads. But you also have a company, and I assume you have customers, but you don't know how many customers actually contribute to your project. It's fascinating, no? Because ultimately you are kind of doing that for your customers. So somehow we're having a really difficult time in making like a chart where we have two circles, customers, and then there's like contributors. But what if we could kind of tie that together, and what's that sweet spot for some of these customers to like be hyper efficient with your software? Let's get back to our sheeps for a second. We talked about it a bit already, but there's two types of kind of motivation. And for those that maybe have done sales before, you probably encounter different reasons why people buy. It's the same with contributors. There's different reasons why people contribute. A student might contribute because they need a certain certification. Other people, like me, were dumpster diving, and I actually contributed because I loved it. I was more like intrinsically motivated. You will see in the next part that as a project, you need to kind of cater to both human properties to attract as many contributors as you can. And certainly if you talk about customers, we'll start with extrinsic motivations. Think of like, why do you do the job that you do? Most likely because, well, one, you kind of like it, but two, there's money. Money is a very powerful carrot, somehow. An award, obviously, as well, but money is kind of the ultimate carrot for human beings, somehow. So let's keep that in mind when we go further in what we've already done so far for the contributor journey. And then we'll get back to that whole, like, what do we really do to convince these customers?
So what are we already doing on the project side of things? We have a little video here. I'm going to skip, but we'll make these slides. But, okay, I'm not going to skip it.
GitLab hackathon this week, and all of your contributions count for Oktoberfest points too. If this is your first time contributing to GitLab, head over to contributors.gitlab.com and start your onboarding. We'll help you get started, give you some tips, and all contributors can request access to GitLab Duo, our suite of AI-powered workflows. Whether you're a backend dev or contributing for the first time, we've got some quick wins win-win issues for everyone. Every merge request earns you points, and you can stack up to 165 points to win the Hackathon Grand Prize. Get some cool swag or plant trees in the forest of GitLab on Tree Nation. If you have questions or need help contributing to an issue, join us in the Contribute channel on the GitLab Community Discord. All MRs must be submitted by Monday.
Yeah, that's for like a previous hackathon, but you can see a bit like extrinsic motivation all combined in this promotional video.
Yeah, so hackathons and the rewards that come with hackathons is definitely one of the ways that we've extended this out, but also looking at just making it easier for people to join your community. How easy is it for somebody to pick up your project and start working on it today? Do they have complex tooling requirements? Do they need to worry about heavy processes with, oh, your merge request needs to be submitted on the 3rd of the month with one foot in the air and your other hand on the top of your head? You know, if you've got really complex requirements around these, it makes it that much more difficult for contributors to get involved. When Nick started the team a couple of years back, we started with we did a survey where we engaged a number of new contributors on their contribution journey. And in the beginning of this year, we actually repeated that study with new contributors, of course. And we're really happy to say that over that time, in this most recent study, we started with we invited 14 people, we had 10 people get through the study, and those same 10 people actually successfully got through an emergency.
As context to the previous study, we had one that wanted to throw their laptop out of the window. So there was a major improvement.
And here's some quotes that we actually had from participants in that study. So how do we get to this? Well, it's through a mixture of tooling, process, and just all-round focus on that contributor journey and how easy it is to get started. We built a platform, contributors.gitlab.com, which itself is open source, and we've actually had many of our community members actually contributing directly to that platform around our contributions. But part of what that does is it helps us gamify the process. So we've got, as you can see there, you're sort of leveling up towards your next achievement. When you get an achievement, you unlock points, and points often in this world mean prizes. And yes, that sometimes takes us to actually getting something physical. But for many contributors, that something physical has been converted into doing something like planting a tree in our forest. So there's a little bit of something for everyone, and as you can see here, that's kind of an example of one of our leaderboards. And these routes and this gamification of things has been a great way to engage the community, to drive that engagement. We have these hackathons quarterly, and they run over a period of a week or so, where anything that gets contributed during that week is a part of that. And then when we talk contributions, well, many times all we want to, when you're starting out, when you're measuring contributions, you're just measuring code contributions, whether that's PRs or merge requests, as we prefer to call them, or actual code contributions. But stepping back and actually realizing that there's a whole lot of other ways that people can get involved. Some people might not necessarily be comfortable writing code, but tracking those contributions, tracking that way of getting through the system through different directions definitely helps with getting people involved, getting people into the project. And sometimes somebody might start today translating your software into different languages, but next week they're feeling a little bit more comfortable, they're feeling a little bit more part of something, and they decide, hey, you know what, they're going to pick up a documentation change. And then documentation is often a gateway drug, so people will move on to documentation. I know I certainly did move on from documentation into actual code changes and slowly work their way through that. So these are a number of ways that we've definitely highlighted that people can get involved with the community, and we're definitely trying to track each one of these as routes to get started. But there's almost certainly other ways to get involved, and that's other ways that you can get people involved with your project too.
So to give you some numbers, otherwise you say, I don't believe you. These are the public contributor numbers that we have on our platform. And you can see that we started the effort somewhere 23, or started to measure that here. And we do see like an increase in all types of contributions. I didn't include translation contributions here because it would mess up with the screen. But you can actually go to this link yourself. We'll share the slides if you just want to dive in. But to continue, you still don't know really what to do with your customers. I'm still here waiting for the answer. And like a year into my job, I also had like, I don't know how to tackle this. Like some of these customers have no affinity with open source. They're using the product, and they're not really like motivated by actually this story. So how do you solve that? Like, how do we actually get there? So we had a couple of iterations, and we ended up with co-create. We initially called it leading organizations. Now it's called co-create with GitLab. And it's interesting because it has just enough carrots on a stick, if you know that expression. Like if you have a donkey with a carrot on a stick, it will move forward. It has just enough carrots for a customer to say, okay, I'll give this a try. So what are these carrots that you can give it a try to then get them into this whole narrative? So if we go next. So this co-create program that we have at GitLab, it connects customer teams with GitLab's engineering teams. So we kind of skip the middleman and the product teams to build meaningful contributions together. And then we, if you go back, so it's like hands-on collaboration, they get a lot of knowledge. Okay, it still doesn't really mean much. So what does this really mean in practice? And what kind of conversations do we have with our customers, Raymond?
So what does this actually mean is we realize that contributions from customers are deeply valuable. This is because the more engaged they are with the platform, the more likely they are to stay customers and potentially even deepen their investment in the tool. So as a branch out to this, we decided to invest in them, in their journey through this process. So what does that mean? So we actually send an engineer from one of our engineering teams to the customer, and they spend a week on site with the customer. And
we went to Australia, Germany, like anywhere over the world. We'll just send someone.
They spend that week on site with them, actually focusing on contributing during that week and driving forward and getting those first few contributions out of the starting gates. We also find that contributors, once they've made those first few contributions, are far more likely to move on to their next contribution and to continue to contribute. But it's getting those first few out of the starting blocks that really, really helps. And having a guide through those steps, having somebody there that actually knows the system, that knows the architecture, that knows the area of the product that you're working on, really, really helps. And we've had some really good feedback from this.
Think of it like a white glove service that you provide to your customers. It's the same process as you saw before. It's just a guided exploration instead of read the documentation.
Yeah. In conjunction with this, we give them comprehensive technical onboarding, which I largely do. But what that means is we actually set up a onboarding session with their team the weeks leading up to the on-site engagement, where we actually go through making sure that our tooling is working in their systems, making sure they have access to all of the tooling, and even in many cases, we actually take them through a trivial fix in the system. But that way it takes them through our merge request process. So now they know how to contribute. It's not this scary thing that they've never done. Sometimes I've worked with people who didn't even understand why they needed to fork the project to be able to contribute in an open source way, because they were like, well, I want to just give me merge rights on your thing. I was like, no, you need to fork it. So, in many cases, when you're working with organizations and customers, you're working with somebody who's maybe not that comfortable with open source. They're interested, they're keen, but they've never been through those processes. So it's just helping them through those training wheels. And of course, as part of the co-create track, they get direct access to an engineer that knows that area of the system and that can actually guide them along the way. And of course, going on from that, we give them the ongoing support to make sure that they have all they need to be successful in their journey. So here's a couple of pictures from some of our co-create workshops. The one on the left actually was in London, so I managed to join the team for a day. One on the right in France, but you can see it's very much hackathon style work. It's co-work. Sometimes the engineer splits things up and we have different people working on different things. Sometimes we do a bit of mob programming. It's whatever works for the team. But the key there is that they've got somebody who understands the project, understands the way around the project, and understands the processes around it. What co-create isn't, right? And this is also, we need to be kind of clear about this upfront with customers, is that it's not a way for them to pay for contributions, right? We're not paying them to make contributions. They're not paying us specifically around this. This is a way to introduce them to open source and the open source culture, and actually to teach them how to fish, for want of a better phrase. All right. It's also not an express lane for them to get a very specific feature or a specific bug fixed. The idea here and the investment here is for us to help them get started with open source and get contributing over a longer period. We're not looking at just investing all of that time to get one thing done. If we wanted to do that, we could take that same engineer, keep them at home, and get them to do a couple of fixes over 1 week. And the other thing that this isn't an opportunity for us to build something that the customer wants that doesn't actually align with our product. At the end of it, we're still building a product. We still have a product vision and a product journey, and we want to make sure that what we're building is all in alignment with that journey and that direction. There's a lot of text on the slide, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but what are the benefits for the customer? As you can see, there's a few. Everything from, in the bottom right-hand corner, we actually help them understand what open source licenses mean, sometimes taking them around those steps. Some of you may have come into face-to-face with CLAs or anything in the past. Part of our code is covered by CLA, so just taking the customer and actually helping them navigate those steps, giving them the right language to even speak to their legal team about it. We also provide certification vouchers to their team, so they can actually, after the fact, they can go out and get a GitLab certification and say that they are GitLab certified. And of course, the direct impact of it. To be able to come out of it and say, oh, internal team X, you know that thing that was bothering you last week? Well, we went and fixed it, and we're deploying the fix next week, and you can actually use it on gitlab.com, and the problem's now solved. So just showing people the power of being able to influence the software that they're using day to day is actually a really, really powerful benefit, and it's a really good draw card. One thing just on that direct impact, especially if the customer's using gitlab.com themselves, we deploy to gitlab.com from master. So the turnaround from them getting a patch merged to actually having it live and available in the system can be as low as 8 or 12 hours even, which is really, really cool to see. Hey, there's that thing I fixed. It got merged. Now I'm waiting for somebody to maybe cut a release, and 6 months down the line, there might be a release of the next release of an open source project. It's live, they can use it tomorrow, and they can go and just, that process, as I was becoming a open source engineer and starting to contribute to GitLab in my previous life before being a part of the team, that was one of the most powerful things. And I could actually say to teams, hey, you know that thing that you were asking about last week? Well, it's fixed. They were like, wow, I didn't know they were working on it. No, they weren't. I fixed it. And they're like, oh, how did you do that? So yeah, that's really cool to see. And a really powerful driver to help with those contributions. What's in it for us? Okay, well, of course there's something in it for us, but it helps us build deeper relationships with the customers. It also helps open the doors to new personas and relationships. Through this program, we've been building really good connections with OSPOs within companies. We've actually given access to our solution architects who are already working with the customer in some ways, access to different people within the organization, which is helping the organization and us build better use of the tool. They're able to understand the feature set better and actually get better value out of their investment. There are challenges. Of course, there's challenges. Everything comes with that. One of those is ongoing contribution. As we mentioned, we want this to be a way of driving ongoing contributions from a customer, and it's not meant to be a once-off dip your toe into an open source world. So we do have challenges, but we do also have a couple of really good success stories where customers, even a year later, are still actively contributing. In fact, I know of one customer that has actually resourced up a team, and they have 2 or 3 people actively contributing to GitLab over a long period. So here's a couple of quotes from some of the places we've done some of these. In some cases, you can see we've actually got direct names out of them. One I really wanted to highlight in the sort of middle on the right there is a company we work with called Scania. We actually had them nominated and they won one of our notable contributor awards. Every month, as part of our open source program, we pick one of our contributors and we sort of highlight them as part of our product release documents. And yeah, one of those actually came through this co-create program, and it was really cool to see them. And in fact, I think that's the one that I mentioned that's still actively contributing today. So really great to see the engagement that we get with some of these.
This is more of a call to action. So if you're curious about the contribution journey into GitLab, maybe even to learn for your own project, feel free to get started. As you saw, it's fairly easy to get started. If there's someone in the room that is a customer of GitLab, feel free to talk to us for one of these journeys. But if you just want to have a talk to us anyway on like what we learned, what you maybe would like to implement in your project, we're here for the next today and tomorrow. So I think that brings us more or less to the end.
Yep.
So I want to thank all of you in this cold room for your attention. It's really cold, so I don't know, that's not always the best thing. And I'm also curious if there's any questions, but first and foremost, thank you for listening. There were a couple of questions also there. There was a hand that I saw. Yeah, feel free to go, and we'll go around.
Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead. I don't know if this works.
No, maybe.
It's fine, we'll use that one.
We'll use this one, it's cool.
I can give this one back to you if you want.
That's true.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask if you had advice for non-profit organizations, because we don't really deal with customers, and that makes contribution more difficult because we need funding ourselves, and many times there is indeed more of an extrinsic motivation. We certainly do mentorships because we have, our team is comprised of 2 developers part-time, so literally 1 FTE maintaining a platform used by over 200 municipalities worldwide. Speaks really well of the team, but I am the technical program manager and I am contributing myself, of course, but I was mostly, we're trying to get part of the contributions back from the municipalities that are using an instance, and most of the times, because they don't contribute, it takes, after such a long time, it diverges so much from the original repo that it's even harder to merge it back. So how would you deal in a situation where resources are more limited? Because after all, you are GitLab.
Maybe as a first question, like, you don't have human resources that have time, right?
No, we have a networking person that tries to get more contributors and then sends it to me because I'm the technical person.
Right.
And sometimes I feel that some of the people that he brings are expecting some kind of money for it.
Yeah. But you also mentioned that you have memberships.
We have mentorships, yes. Those are
Mentor or
mentorships,
okay. Yeah, so I would need to dig in a bit more into your model.
For sure.
But like in the Drupal example that I was part of, a lot happened there with, first of all, recognition, like making sure that if people add something, it's very public, that it's somehow like recognized, even if it's just a comment somewhere, because everyone starts small. But secondary, if you have memberships, some kind of a form of getting access to more information, only allow that if they actually make contributions. Because you're not really working with money in that sense. And then maybe contributions could be your currency. Who knows?
We have a certification, something like that. Also difficult to see how much the fee is, but yeah, thank you.
I think the trick there is figuring out what those carrots are and also figuring out who the current users are, because knowing who the current users are helps you identify what those motivations might be. And that's probably just the trick, is just figuring out what those motivations were. Even with us, from a corporate side, we wanted these corporate contributors, but how do we get that motivation there? And how do we actually get them to take those steps and actually be willing to speak to us?
Right. Thank you.
I have some customers who are in fear of having their name in the wild or their company when they contribute, and then maybe if they introduce a bug, you're on the news, you broke GitLab. How can I take the fear away from my customers that they are reliable for what they are commit?
So I think that can be done in several ways. One of the ways that we do it is every change that comes into GitLab as a tool comes in with tests. And sometimes maybe they don't come from an environment where they understand how to test or whatever the case is. But we've got multiple layers of reviews that every change goes through. The bigger the change, the more domains something might happen. It'll touch even more reviewers. But a change from a trivial change can have 2 reviewers. A particularly busy change can have 6, 8, or even more reviewers, depending on how many domains it touches. At the end of that process, we take on the load, we take on the burden of supporting that. If there's a problem with that, it's our problem with that. It's no longer the customer's problem. So we're not going to turn around 6 weeks, 6 months, 2 years down the line and go to them. You introduced this code. Why has it got this bug? At that point, that code is ours. But during that process, we're making sure that it's effectively tested and hopefully tested enough during the actual contribution point, so that we are confident in taking that code over. And like I mentioned, we deploy from master. So once that change gets merged on our side, it's live on GitLab.com. And maybe if something is a little bit more controversial, or like maybe touching a lot of domains, we can deploy behind feature flags. And that way we can get through even longer form testing and actually have incomplete code in production because it's sitting behind a feature flag and that. But in our case, working with the customers and actually explaining to them that this is how the code process works, and part of that process is the ownership of that, and the risk of that passes on to us. That often helps them feel a little bit more comfortable. And yes, we do have some customers who, because they can, they're allowed to contribute, and if anyone actually goes and looks, they can find who contributed what, or whatever the case is, but we can't actually speak about who they were. But the joke is, if you went into our commit history, you'd find out all of those names of those people there. But because their press office doesn't really understand what this is we're talking about, or whatever, in politics and corporates and stuff, we can't actually mention them by name. But this is open source at the end of the day, and everyone can see who's done what.
Thank you.
And like rightfully so, it's one of the carrots. And we say to these co-create customers, GitLab is responsible. So we'll work together, but once it's merged, it's GitLab's responsibility. And that usually suits them. Okay. So, any other questions? I think the final one.
Hi. So when you say contributors/customers, are you talking to, team leads, or are these like customers that should contribute at their own time? So are you aiming for time that that customer, that developer would have spent doing something else for the company, or is it okay? So who are the people you are, quote unquote, pitching the idea to then?
So you're asking who spends the time at the customer side?
No, I'm trying to see, are you pitching this to team leads? Does it happen as part of a sales process? Is it like customer success, or is it completely ad hoc initiative that you're doing on your own?
It's a great question, and these organizations are super complex, and sometimes it's the CIO, sometimes it's someone in marketing. It's basically a hunt. I think if you want to know that, Wesley is there, and that's his job to find the right person in the organization, and it's a mess.
So yeah,
not Wesley.
we've got some where we are where we're speaking to the team that looks after the GitLab estate for a company, and they said within their team, you know what, we want to contribute and we're willing to throw some resources into that. Or it's a team that's using GitLab within the team, nowhere actually close to the deployment team. But yeah, through this process, we've sort of wound our way in. We've discovered OSPOs where companies, the people who was initially talking to didn't even know they had an open source program. So there's a lot of discovery, there's a lot of back and forth. And unfortunately, when you're talking in the corporate world, some of these things take time. So, just some of these engagements can take sort of 2, 3, 4 months to even get off the ground. But once we get there, then we can actually start to move fairly rapidly, because usually by the time we've hit that point, we've unlocked all of the pieces along the way and discovered the right people to speak to. But yes, it is very much a process, and that's why we have someone like Wesley to really sort of sit there, scraping the bark away to try to find the right tunnels underneath the bark to try to figure out where to go.
All right, cool.
All right,
Thanks
so much for the questions, and thanks for your attendance.
Yeah, thank you very much.